Happy Halloween! But if you watched the LSU Tigers and the New Orleans Saints attempt to play football last weekend, you've already seen the scariest, most terrifying, most spine-tingling, blood-curdling displays of football imaginable. I'm Ruddy Rutledge, and this here is some Bayou football. Welcome all to episode 7 of the Bayou Football Video Podcast. I am Ruddy Rutledge, and he is the main character, Arthur the Bayou Party Dog. The LSU Tigers entered a bona fide house of horrors in College Station, Texas last Saturday, and they experienced a hair-raising fright night of terror in front of 100,000 plus in a 38-23 loss to the Texas A&M Aggies. Not even the world's greatest superheroes could intervene and save the Tigers in this one. LSU dominated the first half. They led at the break 17-7, only to crumble like soft little Halloween sugar cookies, outscored 31-6 in the second half. At this point in the week, what hasn't been said about this game? So many takes this week. Opinions. Infighting among LSU fans about who is to blame for this fiasco. Is it quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, who clearly played his worst football in an LSU uniform in the second half? Is it Brian Kelly, who is the head coach, oversees all aspects of the program? Is it offensive coordinator Joe Sloan, whose scheme and play calling have come under fire this week? Or is it defensive coordinator Blake Baker for not having his defense prepared for A&M's backup quarterback who ran all over the Tigers Saturday night? The most popular take I've seen this week is that this was Nussmeier's fault. But before I take that trip down Blame Game Boulevard, I'd first like to point out a few observations. Nussmeier played well in the first half, but he regressed in the second half. And when the going was toughest, he took it upon himself to try and do everything by himself. The result, a 3-interception tribulation of terror that saw the Aggie defense perform their best impression of Jason Voorhees, slashing up the Tigers' overmatched offense as if they were a helpless band of counselors at Camp Crystal Lake. The gruesome second half display of bloodshed marked the worst half of football this LSU program has seen in 2 years, as a whole team, collectively, offense, defense, special teams. On offense, run game was non-existent. On defense, the Tigers couldn't stop the run. In particular, they couldn't stop A&M's backup quarterback, Marcel Reese, who entered the game at halftime in place of the ineffective Connor Wegman. Special teams, unmitigated botch fest, and that's both halves. So basically, the blame goes all around for this one. All parties mentioned played their part, from the head coach on down to the assistant coaches, to the quarterback, to the rest of the players, to the equipment managers, to the water boys. Okay, the water boys and the water girls aren't on the hook. They just played water boy. But everybody else just about is. The Aggies made LSU look like a fraudulent pretender in the second half, and now the Tigers have their backs to the wall from here on out. A&M was the game I said last week would possibly be the toughest of the season for the Tigers, given that it was at night in a hostile environment. And I also said that it would be the game that would be the most ideal if LSU was going to drop a game. It would be the most ideal game to lose. And lose they did, but it was the horrifying fashion in which it happened that made this game so tough to watch. Taken to the woodshed and humiliated like helpless little kids whose Halloween candy was stolen from them before they could make it home by the big bad bully of the neighborhood. The big bad bully who practices yelling and dresses up for Halloween in a male cheerleader costume. Go on, Arthur. Just go on. Go on in the kitchen, get you some of that lukewarm beer. Maybe he'll contribute something creatively if he catches a little buzz, but I doubt it. Looking ahead, there is absolutely zero room for error for this LSU team as far as their chances of making the college football playoff. The Tigers have an open date this week, and then they have to win out after that. Alabama, Florida, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma. That's the remaining schedule. Not one gimme in that group, especially not Vandy, who played Texas to within 3 points last Saturday, and everybody knows they beat up on Alabama, or they beat Alabama in a monumental upset earlier this season. But next up, it's the Crimson Tide, November 9th in Tiger Stadium, and that game has already been moved to a night, or slated for a nighttime game under the lights in Death Valley, much to the disappointment of Lane Kiffin. Cry harder, Lane. Cry harder, baby. And we'll have a preview of that de facto playoff elimination game on next week's episode. But now, I want to take a closer look at some key elements of this football team and where the Tigers stand heading into that final gauntlet in November. Okay, at quarterback, Nussmeier was just about to break through as a real star in college football before Saturday night's aberration in College Station. He had a lot of the national media talking heads singing his praises. And he was money in the first half, but then the bottom fell out. 3 interceptions in the second half. Awful decision making. Should have been 4 interceptions. And here's another take of mine and mine alone. This young man will get better from this. He will better himself as a player and as a quarterback. Don't expect this slump to continue. He's a highly driven individual by all accounts, and I believe he has the tools to be great. But next up for him, he's got to shake this off and lead this LSU team against Alabama in Tiger Stadium. Offensive line. I've never seen such a disparity in an offensive line's ability to pass block versus its ability to run block. They're stellar at one, and they're horrendous at the other. There's definitely a lack of physical toughness, it seems. I don't care what Will Campbell has to say about that. But I think some of the problem might lie with offensive coordinator Joe Sloan's scheme. I'm not ready to say he has no business being an offensive coordinator at this level, as some people are now saying, as he is young and inexperienced, and I do think he could eventually grow into this role and be good at it. But as of now, he's shown no ability whatsoever to adjust his scheme to his personnel. He does what he does. Zone run blocking, quarterback in the shotgun, read option dive running plays, and he's doing it with a quarterback that has no ability whatsoever, well, not no ability, an unwillingness to keep the ball and run it himself after he meshes in the backfield with a running back. I'm speaking of Nussmeier. This makes the job of the backside defensive end all too easy. He can just fly in like a wild man, blow up the play without hesitation, and attack that mesh point, knowing the quarterback is not going to keep the ball and run it himself. And it's too late in the season to be changing this now. It's installed. It's part of the offense. It's a major aspect of the offense. I don't see them changing it. So, the Tigers have to be more physical up front. They need to move defenders off the line of scrimmage at the point of attack. Or they can keep getting stoned in the running game. And the running backs deserve some blame here also for this lack of a running game. All too often, they don't see the holes as they open up, when they open up, which is Kind of rare, sure, but they have to do a better job of seeing their holes and getting through them. Defense was, keyword was, showing steady improvement since the loss to USC in the season opener, right up until halftime of A&M. And then they just completely collapsed like a house of cards in a span of about 30 minutes. Didn't look like the same defense in the second half that we've been watching for the past few weeks. They were completely unprepared for Reed, A&M's backup quarterback. And that's on Blake Baker as defensive coordinator. He has complete control over this defense. And Reed has played a lot this season. He started 3 games. So you had to think at some point they would go to him if Wegman was ineffective as starter, which is what we saw Saturday night. You had to see it coming. And yet, as we heard from linebacker Greg Penn, by his own admission, LSU did not prepare for Reed. Now on to Brian Kelly. The head coach of the Tigers had many of his critics silenced. Well, not silenced, but let's say quieted down after LSU beat Ole Miss and then went up to Arkansas and hammered the Razorbacks. Well, now those critics are back and ready to pounce. This season's narrative on Kelly has been the same as the 2 previous seasons of his time in Baton Rouge. Bad opening game, but he buckles down, focuses on his team's weaknesses, makes adjustments, and improves the team as the season progresses. But Saturday was a huge setback. There's just no other way around it. And it's not like he dropped some last-minute nail-biter either. He was badly outcoached in the second half, as was his staff, by A&M coach Mike Elko, who's Kelly's former protege. A&M made all the necessary adjustments, and LSU made no adjustments to A&M's adjustments. Now Kelly faces an uphill battle if he wants to make a 12-team college football playoff. And you know what? LSU should make a 12-team playoff. They consider themselves a top 12 program in college football, don't they? They have top 12 resources at their disposal, don't they? They bring in top 12 recruiting classes, don't they? Don't they? Well, then they should make a 12-team playoff. Now, if Kelly drops one more game, he will have that mark against him, something he has failed to do, and now he's in his 3rd season as head coach of the Tigers. It's not like he's in rebuild mode anymore. Special teams. They have been an improvement this season from Kelly's 2 previous seasons, no doubt. But like many other areas, this group took 2 steps back Saturday night against A&M. Now, I'm not saying they're back to square one here, but it's got to be better than that. It's got to be better than it was Saturday. The kicker couldn't kick. The punter couldn't punt. The deep snapper couldn't deep snap. The holder couldn't hold. You get the picture. But now the Tigers, as a collective unit, have to move on. Their next opponent, Bama, just blew out a decent Missouri squad. And like LSU, the Tide also have an open date this weekend. So both teams are going to be well rested, although they're coming off 2 very different types of football games that had 2 very different outcomes. And like I stated earlier, we will have a preview of that game on next week's episode. So chin up, balls and ballettes. The world is not ending for the Tigers just yet, but they are hanging on by a 1-loss thread to a chance at the college football playoff. Lose again, and they're on the outside looking in year 1 of the 12-team playoff. Welcome back, Arthur. Hope the beer was good. Sticking with the horror theme, now we come to the New Orleans Saints. Head coach Dennis Allen's squad made their own trip to a bloody house of nightmares this past weekend, and they were soundly defeated on the road by the Los Angeles Chargers 26-8 on Sunday. The loss marked the sixth straight defeat for New Orleans, and it was the 3rd straight game in which the Saints were blown out by at least 3 scores. On top of that, they've now scored 1 touchdown in their last 10 quarters of play. Ouch. The question is, how bad can it get? New Orleans had been dealing with a mountain of injuries to key offensive players for several weeks, but they had a lot of those players back and in uniform on Sunday. And nothing changed. This team looks lifeless out there. They're overmatched seemingly every time they take the field from a talent standpoint, but there's no spark either. No energy, no spark. And don't say Jake Haener just because he came in and led them to a garbage time field goal that didn't matter. No. It seemed like starting quarterback Spencer Rattler was running for his life every time he dropped back to throw. And I still think it's difficult to get a feel for how well or how poorly he performed, given the atrocious offensive line he's trying to set up behind. It's a jailbreak, more often than not, for the defensive front that the Saints are going against. So again, I ask the question, how bad can it get? Well, we're about to find out, maybe, because it doesn't get any lower in the National Football League in 2024 than losing to the Carolina Panthers, the Saints' next opponent. A loss to Carolina is an absolute rock-bottom moment for any team in the league. I don't care who you are. The coach knows this, of course, the head coach, which is what made his comments, which seemed to be directed at Saints fans, that much harder to accept. Here is what Dennis Allen had to say on Monday following the loss, and I quote, "I don't think we look at things the same way as maybe people outside our building do. We're not focused on looking in the rearview mirror on what happened in the past. We're focused on what are the things we can control." Okay, at this point, it sounds like this man is just trolling Saints fans. No kidding, you can't look in the past, in the rear view. I just said the same thing about LSU. But to say you're not looking at the past at all, even 20 hours after you just dropped your 6th straight game, that sounds like you're burying your head in the sand. You've been awful. Acknowledge you've been awful and tell us you're going to make corrections and move forward and get better. Allen's like, well, we don't care about yesterday, only tomorrow. When yesterday you just lost your 3rd straight game by blowout. Is he denying it had happened? Is he pretending it didn't happen? You have to address your weaknesses in order to move forward and improve. At least Brian Kelly knows that much. Sounds like old Dennis is saying there are no weaknesses. What about that first sentence about not looking at things the same way as people outside the building? That just sounds tone deaf. No awareness whatsoever. People outside the building are watching you, Dennis, destroy everything Sean Payton and Drew Brees built up for 15 years. People outside the building can see your team, that they look like a ragtag bunch of screw-ups who don't play like they care. Hey, Dennis, we can see you. You can pretend we're not here, but we still see you. Might as well just say to hell with the fans, Dennis. They don't see what we're really doing inside the building. No, we don't. New Orleans is an awful football team on the field, though, in plain sight for all of us to see. So how about some self-awareness, Coach? Admit you've been lousy, and then tell us you're going to be better. That's how this works. I know this is just coach speak to the media geeks, but it feels like a slap in the face to the fans. Anyway, the Saints get Derek Carr back at quarterback this week. Whoop-de-doo. Meanwhile, Carolina has been forced to go back to little Bryce Young at quarterback with the injury to Andy Dalton. So there's that too. So maybe this is one they can win and snap this lousy losing streak. And then maybe there will be some light at the end of this tunnel. Of course, there are those Saints fans who are ready to tank for a higher draft pick. And I'm not going to condemn these folks in any way, shape, or form. But if this team truly wants to lose, they'll keep Allen as head coach for the rest of the season. He is fantastic at it. Losing, that is. And that may be what General Manager Mickey Loomis has in mind. But I'd be surprised if team owner Gail Benson knows the team's record right now, or even watches the games for that matter. But that is a different rant for a different day. So Saints versus Panthers this Sunday in Charlotte. Halloween will be over, but the nightmare could very well continue on and on and on and on and on. But at least the Tigers will most certainly not lose this weekend. And we will have that Bama game preview next week. So, for Arthur, the Bayou Party Dog, I'm Ruddy Rutledge. He is a real good boy. And this is some Bayou football.